In these uncertain times where people aren't getting haircuts and beard trimmings as often as, they probably normally would, they're letting themselves go a bit, I think it's important that we do a bit of a return to form, and what better way to do that than the barbershop pole tutorial. Yes, I'm going to show you how to make this thing. It's animatable, and we can actually reverse the direction. We're going to get to all this in a bit, so I'm actually going to control like the speed and the direction of this with the driver, so now it's going downwards. Also, we have control over, and this is the material part of it. Again, we're going to get into it. The size of the stripes, so the thickness of them, the color, stuff like this. So if this is something you're interested in, well, I mean, you already clicked the video. So how do you make a barbershop pole? Well, first of all, it's always best to work from reference. So let's go to the side view. I'm going to go to add a full screen, and I downloaded this image of a barbershop pole. I didn't take this myself. I just ripped it right out of Google Images and didn't credit anybody. Sue me. It's always best to work from reference, and the core idea of the barbershop pole, as you probably already know, is this striped candy cane kind of thing. This is actually the part that is the most difficult. The rest of this is just normal modeling that you'll find in any, basic ass tutorial. But how do we make this material? Well, first of all, I'm gonna make a mesh. This is just for the stripe stuff. We'll make the glass and everything afterwards. I'm just gonna roughly make sure it's the same scale. I want to make sure that it cuts it. Ha ha ha. I should really come prepared for these tutorials with a bunch of puns. I think people would really hate that. What am I looking for? I'm looking for normals, auto smooth. So by the way, if you do shade smooth and it breaks the smoothing, just go like that and you'll still get your smoothing, but it won't look broken, okay? Okay, we have our mesh. How do we make it look stripey? Well, the core idea here is we have a spiral, two of them, but really we're going to focus on one. We have a spiral that goes around the cylinder. And a spiral, if you think about it, it's just a circle that we then kind of corkscrew upwards. So if we can kind of get the equation for a circle and then kind of repeat it, we have a spiral. How do we do that? Well, circles and shapes like these are always angle dependent, right? You want to think about this as a stripe revolving as the angle changes, revolving around the cylinder, right? So as we go around here, the stripe is gonna move upwards, right? Like a corkscrew or a, do I go here? Yes, a duck's penis. Look it up. Some of you who are already in the know are shaking your head. Yes, we already know. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, look at those things. Probably the freakiest part of nature. But they're corkscrew shaped, it just so happens. And very barbed wiry, apparently. Either way, how do we make the thing? Well, first of all, we need an angle, because again, that's the core idea here. The general way we do this is we take some kind of texture coordinates. You can use object coordinates, that's what I'm going to use, or generated coordinates or whatever. I recommend using object coordinates because this texture coordinate system is centered on the origin, right? This is the middle of the cylinder, right? We can see that by separating by x, y, z. You can see the x goes negative to 0 to positive, right down the middle. Same with the y, if we look at it in that direction, and z, which is very important, is leveled off at 0, okay? The way we make an angle, it's some trigonometry. Sorry for the high school PTSD flashbacks, but the way we get an angle, remember, SOHCAHTOA. TOA is the one that says tangent is opposite over adjacent. So if we were to do an inverse tangent, so I'm just going to go to arctan2. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry, just put down this node. If we do an inverse tangent where we have opposite over adjacent as an input, we should get the angle in return. Okay. Long story short, you take y, divide by x, and put it in here. So arctan2 is basically like arctangent, but the division's baked in. So we have opposite over adjacent, and then we're taking inverse tangent. This is going to give us a angle value, and you can kind of see we have this radial gradient. Well, how do we see this for sure? You do something like greater than, and you can see it's kind of like a pie slice that's going around. This is how much, this is how much pie you have at the beginning of Thanksgiving dinner. You eat a tiny bit, and then, your Aunt Deborah comes in and it's gone, right? One thing you're going to notice is that to go all the way over here, we're going to it's going to be pi, right? 3.14 if you go exactly. And for the other way, it's negative pi. That's fine, but it's not very intuitive. Instead of this weird radian situation from negative pi to pi, we want a gradient, circular, that's going from 0 to 1. Well, to do that, let's just do a quick correction. And this is just like a, well, what did they call this? It's not a style of life, an ease of life kind of thing. There's a name for this. We're going to take a map range, which takes a input interval and sends it to an output interval, 0 to 1. For the input, we just put in negative pi to pi, which, by the way, you can just type in here manually. And we got to get rid of this greater than node. And you can see what this does is it takes this gradient that was originally negative pi all the way around to pi, and we're just remapping it from 0 to 1. Why? Because of that word I can't remember, but it's very nice to work with. So you can see when we're at 0, it's full, and then as we go here, it's empty. And you could reverse these to inverse this or to flip it. So I mean, if you go like this, pi to minus pi, it's going to reverse the orientation of it, but that's okay. Okay, we have an angle value, which again is useful because now we can define what part of the cylinder we're looking at, but we want to use this to get a spiral. Well, again, a spiral, I feel like I'm spiraling. A spiral, it's an angle, it's an angle that you're comparing to the z coordinate. How high up are you, okay? Well, let's just take that sentence and translate it into math. Well, if we want to compare, let's add in a math node, set it to compare. There's a compare node. We're going to compare the angle, again, we're outputting the angle here to the z coordinate. So let's just compare these two. You're going to see almost nothing except for these tiny dots if that passes through YouTube compression. This is because we need to take the epsilon and bring it up, okay? What is this doing? Well, you can see we have a spiral segment, just one, so I'm not saying a spiral, but a spiral segment that's going from angle 0. So again, this is using object coordinates where this is the origin, or at least the height of the origin. It wraps around as the angle increases to 1, and there it stops at 1. Okay, this epsilon is going to define the thickness of our stripe. Why? Because we're comparing these two values and saying, I want to look at these two and see if they are within this epsilon, this distance, this threshold from each other. So think of this as a threshold. How close do they have to be to each other to make it white? Okay, okay, cool. So we have the basic idea of a spiral. Now comes the tricky part, okay? You thought that was bad. Here comes the tricky part. How do we get this to loop? Okay, so we go from 0 to 1, but now we want it to go from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 and also negative and all this. Well, you're thinking we could either make our angle repeat, which doesn't really make much sense since it's using y and x coordinates, which, you know, they're just kind of there. We want z to be the one repeating since we go from 0 to 1 and 1 to 2 and 0 to negative 1 and all this, okay? So you're thinking, okay, I want the z coordinate to repeat, easy enough. So instead of going to like 1.23, we just want it to round down to 0.23. So I'm gonna add in a math node, and hopefully you're following here. We're gonna use fraction. You wanna think of this as a rounding function, kind of. And you can see it almost gives us what we want. The logic is there. However, the intersection here is messed up. And I spent a long time trying to fix this, just, you know, messing with the z-coordinate. I'm sure there's a solution, but whatever it is, it's a little too tricky to do or understand, so I'm just going to show you a workaround. But again, fraction almost gives us what we want, but the interpolation between, you know, the end of one interval and the beginning of another is messed up. So we can't get our spiral to connect. And, you know, in theory, this is good. Like, we can get our barbershop pole to look like it's spinning, but it doesn't look continuous because of these discontinuities. Okay. What did I do to fix this? Well, I had this ingenious idea of saying, okay, I have no idea how to fix this, but for wherever there's an issue here, I know on the other side, the stripe is fine. So why don't we just take it and then rotate it back over? So we're just going to kind of patch or overlap we're going to hide the problem with sections that do work is the idea. By the way, comment below if you know what the fuck is wrong with this. I don't know what it is, but here's the solution. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take everything we've done. You can think of this as a spiral node group because we're going to control G and turn it into a node group, okay? So what we have so far is just this node group that we input in some kind of texture coordinates. I'm going to use object coordinates. It gives us a spiral. I'm going to take this. I'm going to duplicate it. So now we have 2 copies. I want both of them to be visible. Again, the idea is to patch one over the other. So I'm going to add them together. Right now it's going to look the same, except the white areas are actually equal to 2 now, not 1. You can kind of see a change in brightness. It's subtle. Whatever, this isn't important. What we want is the second spiral to kind of spin and overlap this issue. Well, we have a good node for that. It's called vector rotate. We take it, we spin it, and this is also another way to spin the pole. You don't have to do it in geometry. You could just do it in texture coordinates. We take the angle. We want to sample from the back, so we're going to rotate it by 180 degrees. Again, 180 is half a revolution, so now we're sampling from behind. However, you can see, because, you know, there's kind of this illusion when you increase the angle that it's rising upwards. Because half a revolution is only going to go halfway between one stripe and the next one, you can see it's not where it's supposed to be. So again, this is our original. We want to patch up these areas, but it's going halfway in between. Well, that's also an easy fix. What we need to do, I can't remember if it's before or after, or if it even matters. I guess after would make more sense, but I don't think it matters. We are going to add, in other words, translate the rotated version by, it should be 0.5, something like that. I do think because this is periodic, negative 0.5 would work as well, but 0.5, okay? So you can see now we are patching over this area. Of course, it's kind of showing through because we're set to Filmic and all this, and there's a whole discussion there about setting it to standard and all this. But assuming you're in Filmic, the simple fix for this is instead of addition, I just want to say, just take the biggest value, right? In other words, a maximum. So it's going to give us these original stripes, but wherever we have this issue, in other words, the value is equal to 0, it's black, we're going to sample from here, take the maximum, and it's going to give us this seamless pull. Now, there's still issues on the top faces, and we could either fix that by, and this is probably the easiest way, you could just fix it by deleting those, but again, not again. For the first time, it doesn't really matter, okay, because we're going to put like metal and glass over it, so whatever. Okay, so what do we have so far? Right now we have a fixed spiral, but I want a lot of control over it, and remember, we do need a double helix, as it were. So, node group, I'm going to add in a controller, so these are our inputs. We already have the vector input for the object coordinates. I'm just going to take this, I'm going to connect it to the epsilon. Since these are basically the same node group, you can see epsilon is added to both of these. What the fuck am I talking about? The point is we've added a parameter, so now we can control the thickness. Now, of course, we'd want to control the thickness equivalently for both of these, since one is patching over the other. But now we have a slider for the thickness of this. What else do we want? We want the slider for how many spirals we have. Well, this one I'm not going to add in the node group because what we can do is before any of this happens, before the rotation and it gets sent to both of these node groups, what we can do is we can just do this by like stretching the coordinate system. So something like a multiplication by, so 1, 1, 1 means do nothing because we're multiplying by 1, it's the identity. Stretch the z coordinate. And you can see it works because the way we've set it up is it's angle dependent and it's cyclic periodic, but don't worry about it, okay? So what do we have so far? Well, how many times am I going to say that? We have a spiral is the point. I want the setup where we have 2 of them. So I'm going to take all of this again. It's important to add a reroute node or you're going to have 2 parameters for this value. So just make it go to 1 connection, same thing here. I'm going to take all this, I'm going to hit Control G. That's going to be another node group. We can call this one something useful like spiral or maybe spiraling. Copy that over. We should call this pole material or something. And now we have a node group that, all we need to do is import in a coordinate system and a thickness. So if we want 2 of these, I'm just going to add in 2 spiraling node groups. This time I'm going to, I guess you could add them. I guess for now let's add them and then we'll add in color. So I'm just going to add both of these. And soon we're going to be off of the spiral and get back to the easy stuff, don't worry. I'm going to set this epsilon to be the same thing for both and the same coordinate system for both. So these are now copies. Which means, again, just like last time, they're going to be adding right over each other. For this version, spiraling number 2, I'm going to do the same trick from before. Vector math, I'm going to add, I think, half a revolution, so 0.5. Boom. And again, the only reason these numbers turn out so nice, like 0.5 and 1 and all this, is because very, very originally, right in the beginning, we added this map range. Otherwise, we'd have to go to like pi divided by 2 and stuff like this. Would not recommend. Okay? Okay, now we have 2 stripes. Now I want these to be different colors. So a simple way to do this, we're going to mix RGB. In other words, we're going to mix 2 colors. For the first spiral, we are going to mix the color gray or white with the color red. And you can actually sample the textures to get realistic colors. I'm just going to do this the lazy way, okay? Just pick rough colors. I'm then going to take this, I'm going to mix it again, this time using the second group. Again, the way we're doing this is instead of using both of these at the same time, we're first making it white, then we are going to use the spiraling as the factor to say where it's red, then we're going to take that and then use another factor, spiraling 2, to say where it is blue, okay? Now, because we're using the same epsilon for both of these, in other words, the thickness is the same, we now have a nice way to control all of this. If these were independent from each other, we could have one line be thicker than another, and I'm sure there are barbershop poles like that. Just so you know, you do have that control, okay? And like I was talking about before we do anything with our texture coordinates, I do want to do a scaling, just so we have control over that as well. And this can be, I don't know, a couple of stripes, something like this. 0.5 because it's nice, and let's make these stripes a bit thinner so they kind of look like this. And really, you know, what's going to make this look realistic is getting the shape right. So we want to make sure the scaling's correct and all this, whatever. You can go back and modify this. But that's the beginning of our barbershop poll. Now let's get the rest of this thing done and make it look good. So I'm just going to call this, it's a good time to save. I'm going to call this available on Patreon because I can't think of a better way to advertise. I'm going to post this one file on Patreon, whatever, you can get it, but let's continue. Let's set up our scene. So I'm going to use cycles because, you know, it's better. Some people would argue not, but, you know, they're idiots and, you know, they're going to die young. With cycles, I want to set a Hdri environment because I don't want to set up custom lighting. By the way, major spoiler for the next CG Matter tutorial, Chef Boyardee. Not going to spoil anything. Hdri. I'm going to set it to this one because I've tested it before. I like it. And I'm going to go to film and set it to transparent. So we do have our Hdri, right? But it's not going to be visible. Well, you're going to notice that it's not really affecting this poll. Why? Because it's not a BSDF. So let's fix that. We are going to take all this color stuff that we did, plug it into a principled BSDF as the color. And now you can see that, you know, shading actually matters. If I add in a light source, you can see it's very faint because this light is faint, right? But it is affecting it, okay? Do we want to do anything else to this? Not really. Maybe, first of all, it shouldn't be too shiny, so something like 0.7, increase the roughness, and maybe one more little trick is I'm just going to add a bit of dirt over this. So easy way to do this is I'm going to take our whole color, our whole base color setup, I'm going to multiply it by the color black, and then we're just going to modify the factor. So when it's 1, it's black. When it's, you know, not, it's not. And this is going to be our dirt setup. Well, where should our factor be? It's going to be defined by this noise texture, for which I want to use object coordinates so we don't get any generated coordinates stretching. We take this, we do a color ramp just to make it a bit more contrasty. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because this has nothing to do with the tutorial. This is just going to be a layer of dirt. You plug it in as a factor. Let's see what it gives us. Well, it's subtle, but it does exist. So this is the before and the after. If you want it to be more intense, you just want to up the contrast a bit, and then you're going to see some of this. Let's make the scale a bit smaller so the dirt's a bit patchier, higher roughness, and finally, less visible. So you take the white area where the factor is going to show through, and you say, I think, yes, we dipped this one, and it's going to be like an opacity slider. Something like this. Okay, barbershop poll done. Let's continue this mess. Okay, next part, glass. How do we do glass? Well, glass is simple. What we do is I'm just going to duplicate this because this is roughly the shape we need. We just need it to be slightly bigger. So I'm going to take this. I guess it's too thin to see. I'm going to scale this, but only on the, you know, everything except the Z-axis. So Shift-Z while you scale to do that. So again, scale, Shift-Z to scale on everything except the Z-axis. It's a great trick. I'm going to make it slightly bigger than the original. I'm going to give this a new material, which I'm going to call glass. We're not going to get too fancy with the rest of this from now on, but just to keep it simple. By the way, for some reason, my version of Blender, you got to move it to update it. I guess I got to get a newer version of 2.93, whatever. What are we going to do? I guess we're going to up the transmission. That'll make it kind of, I don't know, like a frosted glass. You bring down the roughness, and that's going to make it more of a glassy glass. Just to make it look better and physically accurate so we don't get this blackness stuff going on here with refraction. Add in a solidify modifier. That's just going to give this a bit of thickness, and that kind of, you know, it already solves our issue. As for the thickness, you can decide what you want it to be. The thinner it is, the less, you know, intense the glass is, but we also have this alpha slider that we can bring down, so it still looks like glass, but it's literally just making it more transparent. It's almost like, or maybe it's exactly like mixing this with a transparent BSDF. So I'm just going to use this to have a glass covering, which again, I can make this like a bit bigger so you can see there's more distance in between the glass and this. But I don't want to be insane about this. So for now, I'm going to keep it like this. We can go back to it. Next, how do we make the metal? Okay, well, metal's pretty easy. And by the way, at any point, this would be a good time to like resize this a little, just so it's like roughly the correct dimensions. For the caps, the metal caps, just add in a cylinder. Make it have more segments maybe. No, 60 is fine. Just put it at the top, and again, this is the reason why deleting the top and bottom faces of this pole don't matter. We're going to cover it up, okay? Take this, I guess wireframe mode's the best to model with, and let's see. I guess we have a couple steps and then like a spherical cap. Let's do that super quickly. So main idea, Control R is gonna add a loop cut. We're just gonna add a loop cut in some places. And let's actually delete this top face for now. We'll come back to that. Actually, we can keep it. What I'm thinking is just to generate this mesh with the steps and all that, I want to do a lot of extrusions. So extrude along normals. Make sure it's not set to extrude, but extrude along normals. This is going to let us bring everything in a bit, although it does give us some extra geometry on the top, which is why I wanted to delete it, but we'll get back to that. So another loop cut, select the loop faces, extrude along normals, and you can just do this a couple times, but yeah, I like the look of that. I'm just going to add in one more. This time we're going to do the reverse. So loop cut. This time I'm going to extrude the other way. You can hold down shift to make it more gradual. Cool. And now let's do the capping part of it. To do this, I guess simple way to do it is we're just going to delete these top faces. Yeah, that's a good way to do it. We take all these vertices. By the way, the reason I'm in wireframe mode for this is not only because it's easier to see, but it's an easy way to select stuff. Like if I was in solid mode and went like this, it doesn't select the ones in the back. But with wireframe, it selects everything. With these, click F to fill in the face. And then finally, we're going to select this, Control B to bevel, C to clamp, so it doesn't go beyond that. If you don't hit C, it's going to do this. And bring up the number of divisions. So again, if you don't hit C, you're going to get... this is I forget the name for this, but this is kind of like how you model a black hole. There's a name for this shape in differential geometry. What am I even talking about? Make a cap, take all of it, merge by distance. It's going to get rid of the extra vertices that we clamped and pinched at the pole. And then finally, oh, that's such a good pun. It's a pole. It literally is. I'm on a roll. And I can't be stopped, not even by the patrol. Okay, we have our cap. Let's make it look a tiny bit better. General idea, you take these loops where the steps are. So I'm trying to select these, but Blender's not cooperating. You take these, we're gonna bevel by less this because we don't need a lot of geometry. Maybe 1, or we could have it be smooth. I'm thinking 1, just kind of like a nice bevel on the metal, something like that. And maybe 1 more over here. Just gonna select these edges and bevel them a tiny bit. There we go. Okay, shade smooth, again, just like before if you had that issue, auto smooth. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, we have a cap. By the way, whatever we do here, we are obviously going to duplicate beneath. But for now, let's make a metallic material. Easy way to make it look like a metal is you take the metal slider, you make it more metal, obviously. And then you move it to update it. By the way this looks is entirely going to be dependent on the environment because it's going to be reflecting stuff. So you might want to switch between a bunch of different environments, but for now, make it metallic, make the roughness low. It's almost like a mirror. It's a tiny bit more rough than a mirror. So something like 0.1. So you can see there's a bit of roughness. It's not literally 100% reflective, but just a little something, maybe even 0.15. Nah, that's too much. 0.1. Now we have a reflective thing. We can take it, we can make it a darker metal. You know what, I'm kind of flip-flopping on this. I do want it to be a bit rough. I don't want it to be too much. That looks okay. We're going to take this and then in edit mode. By the way, whatever we do to this, right, if we add in a sphere in edit mode or an icosphere, it's going to be metallic, right, because the material is applied to the entire face set of the object. The idea is we take a cube, we position it roughly where, you know, it would attach to a wall. So I'm thinking something like this, like that. This isn't going to be structurally sound, but you know what? I feel like the barbershop business is failing anyways. This is the least of their problems. I don't even know if that's true. Probably not. People always need to get haircuts. I don't know. I don't understand why people don't give themselves their own haircuts, but people do always need haircuts. By the way, to select this entire thing, just click L while hovering over it to select a linked. I'm going to scale, shift, Y. Yes, to scale on everything except the Y-axis effectively to make it thinner. Let's see what that looks like. Yes, we have a connection. Just like anything else, you want to select everything and just bevel it a tiny bit. Something like this. You could spend more time on the connection, but I'm happy with it. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to rotate it along the Y-axis. Yes, by 180 degrees. Bring it downwards, and we have symmetry. Yes, you could use the mirror modifier, But record your own tutorial if you want to do that. I'm happy with this. Okay, we have a barbershop pole, but we haven't really by the way, I do want to finish that thought about the barbershop business. Long story short, I don't know. Now, how do we make this thing animated? I want to talk about, now that we've made the thing, how do we actually use our parameters? Well, first of all, we have this, our material for this, where really all we care about is these two sliders. Everything else is kind of useless. In fact, we could turn it into a node group, but it's not too important. We have this for this thickness of our stripes. Again, you can make them independent of each other, where one's thicker than another. Remember, we have that amount of control. And let me make them thicker. Something like that. We also have this multiplication slider, which again is going to manipulate our texture coordinates before anything happens. So this is going to be the number of stripes, okay? But finally, how do we animate this? Well, two approaches. First approach is the driver approach. This is probably, in some sense, easier, better. I don't know. You take this, the pole, not the glass. You want to make sure you're selecting the pole. The Z rotation is going to be the right axis of rotation for this. You take this, you type in hash frame, or octothorpe, or as you kids know it, hashtag. Hashtag frame is going to add in a driver where every single frame, it's going to look at the frame number. So on frame 1, it's going to output in radians, by the way, so it's going to be always times 57.3, so the next one's going to be like 114 or 115. It's going to take the frame number and convert it into radians. Of course, that's going to be a bit too fast. So you take it, you divide it by, 10. In other words, make it 10 times slower, and there you go, basic animation. By the way, you're not going to be able to view this in, look dev Eevee because of the glass, but this is a good way to, if you hide it, it's a good way to see. So we have control over this. The bigger the number, the slower it is because we're dividing by more, so it's going to be slower. It's kind of like making a smaller number by dividing by a bigger denominator, whatever. We can also make this negative, so just put in a negative sign, and now it's going to go the other direction. It's going to go upwards, so this is upwards, this is downwards. We have control over that. Just so you know, another way, I haven't tested it, but I assume another way to control this is, I guess, through texture coordinates. Let's try it out. We do, before anything, again, we do a vector rotate, and let's see, we change the angle. Yes, this is another way to do it. How would you do it here? Well, I'd add in a driver, the same way we did before, right? You just type in hash frame and all this, which is why, I'm not going to use this approach because it's just extra steps, and this is more intuitive. So let's do hash frame 10. We have the basic thing, and the rest of this is, setting up your scene. You set up a wall, let's rotate it by 90 degrees. This is just so it actually has a shadow that maybe it's casting, and it's like attached to some kind of surface. So let's actually get rid of our reference at this point. I'm thinking, what do we want to do to make this look like a good scene? I want it to have that infinity wall effect, so I'm just going to take this, I'm going to scale it up. I'm going to take our wall here and extrude along the y-axis. Something like that. I'm just making a basic scene. And whoops. I guess it really helps to have these axes. So let's see this. And move it along the x-axis. This one you want to bevel just so you don't see the curvature too much. Okay, that's looking pretty sweet. Final thing, the material for this, I'm going to call it the background material. Always bring up the roughness as high as possible on these kinds of things because you don't want to see reflection and stuff like this. Camera, how do we want to set this up? Camera to view is going to make it so that when you navigate around, sometimes annoyingly, it moves with the camera. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm thinking, it's so noisy. Maybe look dev mode is the way to go when it comes to this. I'm just setting up my camera and then we're gonna render this. So 75, boop, like that. Let's see what that looks like. If the background's distracting you, pass your part out, you wanna increase it. And I kind of like the way that looks. The good thing about, again, adding in a wall is it's not only going to, have it, locked into something, but also it's going to reflect that surface. If you don't want that, by the way, and you should, but if you don't want the white wall to be reflecting and all this, I think we can go to this object, go to visibility, and you can disable one of these. I'm not sure which one it is, but it's maybe glossy is going to prevent it. Yeah, you can see the reflection right here. So here you can see it's being reflected. You turn off glossy and it's as if it was never there. Although it's going to make it look like it's not really integrated with the scene. Okay, so let's see. What do we have so far? We have the barbershop pole. It's being animated with our driver. We want this to be a very short animation since it's essentially the same thing over and over and over again. Let's do 30 frames per second for 60 seconds. So in other words, 2 seconds of revolution. Let's add in a timeline just so we can see what that looks like. So play, 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 boom. You could reverse the direction, all this. And otherwise, I don't know, just color correction, stuff like this. Okay, I'm happy with this. So here comes the part of the tutorial that's sponsored. Yay, we have a sponsor, Default Cube sponsored. Thank you to Concierge Render for sponsoring this tutorial. What a strong start. Concierge Render is a render farm. It's a very good render farm. I've used it a lot in my previous projects, and I'm going to show you how you would render a scene like this that I've showed you how to make from beginning to end, so you haven't really missed any steps. How do we render this with Concierge Render? Well, once we have our scene set up, like we have our camera, we've done all this stuff. We just need to prep our blend file for upload to the website, okay? So 2 things, mainly file, cleanup. You want to clean up unused data blocks. This is just going to get rid of extra stuff like the reference image, extra meshes. This is just going to make it so your blend file is more lightweight, which might make it render faster. I don't know if it's true. Either way, it's going to make the file size smaller, which is what matters. Second thing, and this is very important, okay, this is the more important one. File, external data, automatically pack into blend. You're going to see it says packed 1 files. What this is going to do is any file that was used in this project, and you're thinking, oh, we got rid of the reference, why did it pack 1 file? It's the Hdri. Any file that was used in this, so in this case the Hdri, is now packed into the blend. So when we send it to the render farm, it's going to actually have that environment lighting and we can actually use it. So make sure you do the cleanup, the external data, and save this to a place that you like. Final thing I'm going to do with this is I'm just going to pick a sample count that I like. So I don't know, something like adaptive sampling, something like 400 samples a frame. We can mess with this later. When you're good, just quit out of Blender, and I'll meet you over on the Concierge Render website. Whoa, we made it over to the Concierge Render website. So first of all, you're going to need to make an account. When you do, you're going to get $5 in free render credits. There's a link in the description for where you can do that. But once you've made your account, you go to log in. I'm going to hide this information because, we're close. You've been watching for like 30 some minutes, but I don't want you logging into my account, sorry. You're going to sign into your account, and here is basically your dashboard. Okay, this is where the magic happens, whatever. Let me show you how to upload your project and how to render it, etc. So first thing you're going to do, don't be bothered by any of this. You just go to upload and launch renders. When you do that, you go to upload file. So this is where we're actually going to put our blend on the I don't know, the website, the server. I'm not a technician. Either way, we're going to give them the blend, and then we're going to pick render settings. So between the cut and here, I actually renamed this to Barbershop Pole Render because I found that it's helpful to give a name that actually is relevant instead of available on Patreon. So you're going to upload the blend. Again, this is going to be 8 megabytes, which is almost entirely the Hdri. And that's, in this case, it's a good thing because that the file's actually been uploaded with all the background or the environment lightings and all this. You're going to have this upload. This might take a long time if it's a big file. It will take no time if it's a small file, obviously. Go to Actions, go to Launch Render, and usually it buffers for a bit, but I guess it didn't. Either way, this is our render setting. So you really want to make sure you pick the correct things here so you don't, end up rendering the incorrect things. So first of all, render platform. Do you want to use Blender 2.81, 8.2, blah, blah, blah? We're going to use the newest version, 2.92. Yes, we made it on 2.93, which is an alpha or beta or something currently, but we didn't actually use any feature of it that 2.92 isn't also compatible with. So the only one you might want to be a bit wary of is geometry nodes, because that one's like updating, although I do think it's in 2.92. Either way, pick the newest version. I'm going to be using cycles. You could, pick either, but we set this up as a cycles render. For the render type, this is very important. Make sure this is correct. You could render as a still image. That's just going to render a single frame. You can render an animation, which is what we want, a bunch of frames. And you can actually preview a preview, or you could render a preview frame, which is a low resolution render of one of the frames, just to make sure before you spend some of your render credits, right, before you put some money into this, you want to make sure it's rendering the correct thing. But I'm pretty confident about this. So animation, frames and resolution, I'm going to set it, it's importing our settings from the blend file. Remember, we said 400 samples, 1 through 60. Make sure these are all correct. For the resolution, native resolution, 1080p, and custom resolution are all the same thing in my case, since it's a 1080p project. But if it's not, pick something different. So just pick one of these. For the hardware, this is it's up to you. I mean, these are all up to you. But this is the idea of how fast do you want the render to be versus how expensive do you want it to be. So you got to negotiate there. Do you want the fastest hardware, which is obviously going to be more expensive because it's faster? Do you want, the cheapest one, but it's going to be a bit slower? That's up to you. I always use the basic. It's worked fine for me. You make your decision, but this is a good cost to speed ratio for me. So I set it to basic. I hit render, and then you let it think for a second or even 2 seconds. And in a second, there we go. It's gonna render launch, blah, blah, blah. Just click job manager. And then you go to view details, okay? And this is our render job. So again, you can see everything from before. It's gonna render as a PNG sequence, which eventually we're gonna be able to download once it's prepared. It's 2.92, it cycles, blah, 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 blah. We don't care about that. We know that's the case. What we care about is all this stuff on the left. So we care about how much it's gonna cost, how long it's gonna take, etc. And basically, all you need to do is just wait a tiny bit. I mean, by a tiny bit, I mean significantly less time than it would take for you to render all frames consecutively on a single computer. But you can see right now it's basically loading all our frames. It's using multiple, I don't know if it's using multiple GPUs or multiple systems at the same time, but you can see it's running parallel, which is why it's going to be faster than even a very fast computer. It's going to load all of these, or it's going to do it pretty quickly, and then you're going to see it's going to actually start rendering the frame. So I guess I'll just talk until that happens, and then maybe we'll do a cut, because I do want to show you this current cost calculation thing that's going on here. So there you go, and you can see it's actually started rendering out some frames, which we can download one by one by one. I'm not going to do that because I'm not psychotic. I'm just going to wait for it to finish. You click download outputs as a zip file, but I don't care about that. Well, what's actually interesting is you can see it's going to estimate that this whole render, which would have taken, I don't know, on my computer, maybe a couple hours at 400 samples. I'm not quite sure. But you can see that for a very short amount of time, it's going to cost us roughly $1.20. This is an estimate. This is actually what's being paid so far. So far, we've actually spent $1 over the 53 frames. And then we're going to get a tiny bit more on the last 7 frames. Let's see what that ends up costing. Any moment now. This is next level, shouldn't swear here. This is next level stuff, being able to show the render during the tutorial, not cutting away. You can see the total cost was $1.18. What was the original? Was it $1.14, $1.20? I don't know. Either way, you're paying $1 to get this to be significantly faster. You can see we have all our frames, or you can just download outputs, which you do on the desktop, and you download it, and here, I'm playing the render right now. This is basically what Concierge Render outputs. It's the same thing that you would get on your own computer, but it doesn't take hours. So you can rely on the consistency, but also get the, speed boost. Anyways, this episode's been sponsored by Concierge Render. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. Check it out. There's a link in the description if you're interested in that render farm. But other than that, you now know how to make a barbershop pole in excruciating detail. These tutorials are getting too whatever. One's available on Patreon, and that's it. That's the show. See ya.